It is the driving force behind the push to build 2 new bridges, traffic congestion, projected to get much worse with time. But the Bridges Project's own study is casting doubt on that prediction because it dramatically scales back the projections of just how many drivers will cross the river in the future. Tyler Allen is an outspoken activist for an East End bridge only.
And the numbers are radically lower than anything they suggested.
Right now, about 225,000 vehicles cross the Ohio each day on Louisville's 3 bridges. But for the target year of 2030, look how the numbers have changed. 10 years ago, an environmental impact study projected nearly 363,000 river crossings each day. This new study, though, dials that number back to only 285,000 river crossings per day, a difference of more than 20%. Allen suggests the initial projections were inflated to pave the way for 2 bridges.
There is no other way to look at it than that, okay? These numbers are so incredibly different.
They sold us the bridges based upon this number, and now the real numbers end up being far less.
I don't see it that way at all. We approached this project with some goals in mind, and those goals had everything to do with safety and mobility and connectivity.
And Kentucky's Transportation Secretary explains the conflicting studies are not comparable because they were commissioned for different reasons. He says the new toll revenue study is intentionally conservative because toll bond buyers need to be confident, no matter what happens, that the project will generate enough money to pay off the bonds.
Basically what I said to them was make sure that we look at this project from the perspective of what happens if revenues or traffic volumes aren't as high as originally projected.
In yet another eye-opener, after Kentuckiana spends $1.3 billion plus financing costs for the downtown half of the project alone, the study projects fewer drivers will use the 2 downtown I-65 bridges than those who cross on just the Kennedy alone today.
It's going to be brand new, cleaned up roadways and far fewer cars using it.
Last year, the I-65 Kennedy Bridge handled 122,000 vehicles per day. This study projects, though, that in 2030, the 2 I-65 bridges combined, that's the Kennedy southbound and the new bridge northbound, 12 lanes in all, will carry about 30% less traffic, 87,000 vehicles total per day. Doesn't that seem backwards?
Well, not exactly. I mean,
Secretary Hancock says the East End Bridge will absorb some traffic. The study projects 45,000 East End crossings per day in 2030. Plus, he says some drivers will avoid paying tolls and take that traffic to the Sherman-Mitten and 2nd Street bridges instead.
And what we're really doing is dispersing traffic across the whole system.
And Hancock says don't forget the Kennedy and Spaghetti Junction are 50 years old.
We were going to have to come in and upgrade those facilities anyway.
But the questions remain. At what price? And is it still worth it considering these projections?
There's a whole lot of bait and switch in this. A whole lot of bait and switch.
You know, we feel good that where we are is where we need to be and that the project will prove itself over time.
Mark your calendars for 2030 when projections hit reality. And we'll see whether the project has bridged the gap. Well, Doug and Rachel and all of our viewers, now if you're a part-time worker, if you work in a restaurant, we want to hear from you. It's a trade-off that some part-time employees simply can't afford. They do get access to health care, but a much smaller paycheck. In the waiting room of the Family Health Center on Portland Avenue in Louisville, Kelly Ramirez appears to be a perfect example of how the Affordable Care Act will help Americans who currently don't have health insurance.
I don't have any. I can't afford it. I come here.
Yet Ramirez isn't embracing the ACA, even as it makes her eligible for free health insurance.
I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Ramirez is already paying a steep price for her free health insurance.
Yeah, I got my hours cut in half because they put a new computer system in order so that they didn't have to give health insurance.
What's it meant for your bottom line?
Well, it's meant a lot.
Obamacare requires employers with more than 50 full-time equivalent workers to offer health insurance to each employee who works at least 30 hours a week. Though the Obama administration has postponed the employer mandate until January of 2015, some companies, especially restaurants, are already cutting part-timers' hours below 30 per week. Ramirez, a restaurant server, is one of the so-called 29ers.
They only have so many people that can be full-time because of the cost of health insurance. And so now, most of us that are working, lower jobs are going to have to get a second job just to be able to make it.
Though Ramirez would rather keep her health care as it is, her provider can't wait for the ACA's reimbursements to kick in.
It will, first of all, help us get out of the current operating deficit that we're experiencing this year, over $2 million. But as we get out of the operating deficit, we will be able to expand facilities, expand the number of staff.
With Obamacare sign-ups just 2 weeks away, Senator Rand Paul says it's not too late to delay the entire law and address the unintended consequences.
There's a lot unknown about this, and so I think the compromise would be somewhere in between, but we only get to that if the Republicans now stand up and say, we're not going to fund it.
If I could, what do you say to the people who are already wanting to sign up and are expecting their coverage to kick in? They should be delayed?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. I think the answer needs to be somewhere in between.
Now, just last week, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell filed an amendment to an energy efficiency bill that would both enforce that delay of the employer mandate and also delay the individual mandate for 1 year. Meanwhile, Republican primary challenger Matt Bevin has criticized McConnell for not doing more to stop the ACA. Joe Arnold, WHAS 11 News. Beyond the revelations from the bus crash investigation is the simple fact that charter bus companies, not Jefferson County Public School District buses, handle most JCPS field trips. If she's going on a field trip, like to the zoo, for instance, who would you expect to take her to the zoo?
JCPS.
And are you surprised to learn that actually it would be a charter company instead?
Yes.
Parents are told the mode of transportation on the JCPS field trip permission slip.
However, we don't know, whichever transportation company, we don't have their ratings on their buses.
I can answer that.
Michael Razor, the chief operations officer of JCPS, explains it's logistically impossible for district buses to handle field trips and take children home from school.
The bus drivers need to be back about 1:30, and a lot of field trips wouldn't be over at that time.
We interviewed Razor last month before our Commonwealth bus discoveries. Yet the next logical question was the same then as it is now. Is a charter bus as safe as a JCPS bus?
Have to be very safe and have to follow that same stringent criteria, at least in Jefferson County, that we expect of our bus.
Razor says charter companies are expected to follow the same inspection schedule as JCPS. The owner of DC Tours, one of 7 charter bus companies on the JCPS vendor list, says he regularly requests state police to inspect his fleet and has 2 full-time mechanics on duty.
We follow the same guidelines as JCPS. I mean, we have state inspectors like they do.
Yet not all charter companies do. As our investigation uncovered, a federal compliance review found dozens of violations at Commonwealth Bus Service, and an admission by Bus 450's owner it had not had the required annual inspection for a few years. That revelation prompted JCPS to change procedure. Until last week, charter bus companies kept their inspection records on file at their own offices and only made them available to JCPS upon request. Now, JCPS says vendors will be required to submit those inspection records to the school district offices, where they'll be kept on file.
Checking for securement to the floor.
Though buses are subject to spot inspections by state police, the agency has conducted nearly 1,500 so far this year. Regular inspections, as it stands under current Kentucky law, can be carried out by any certified inspector, including the bus owners, who can greenlight their own bus. So is that as reliable as a state police inspection?
The ones that are doing the self-certification are qualified to do the inspections, and from the files that we've seen, they seem to be working very well.
But Miller Transportation's John Miller says the law needs to be changed to require independent inspections.
That's something that we would like to see the State Institute would be some sort of third-party inspection program, at least for the private operators.